Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, how y'all feeling? It's Wednesday, right? It's hump day. I'm feeling every bit of it. I've had such a week, and I hope that you have had an amazing week. And again, we want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Welcome to the Six Bridges Book Festival. We're glad that you could be anywhere else tonight doing anything, but you've chosen to be with us, and we greatly appreciate it. Before we begin, I hope that they are here. I'm not sure. Are our HBCU presidents here? Are any of you out there? It's kind of bright up here, so I can't see you. They may trickle in. Okay, maybe they'll trickle in later, but I did want to acknowledge them if they are here, our local HBCU presidents, our historically Black colleges and university leadership, but perhaps they'll come in a little later and we'll get a chance to shout them out then. But it is my true honor to introduce Dr. Karida Brown. She's a public intellectual, sociologist, oral historian, NAACP Image Award-winning author, and what she proudly calls, and I just really love this, a Black academic. Her scholarship, teaching, and public voice center on the fullness of Black life, past and present. Now, this People's Professor has authored 6 books, including Gone Home, Race and Roots Through Appalachia, The Sociology of W. Du Bois, the new Brownies Book, which you guys have got to get that with someone I know that she really loves, Charlie Palmer, and her latest, which we're here to talk about tonight, The Battle for the Black Mind. She's currently a professor of sociology at Emory University in Georgia, and she's in Arkansas tonight in Little Rock. So again, would you give it up for her for being in Little Rock at Six Bridges? We're celebrating her. We're so excited. Now, we don't have much time, so we're going to get into it. How many of you have read the book? Just clap. Okay, you've read the book. Isn't it amazing? Okay. I just want to start early in the book, in the introduction, actually. And how I got notes, like I'm just geeked out over this title. The classroom is where the core of American life takes shape. Why has the classroom always been such a contested space in America?
The battleground for the moral conscience of the nation is and has always been the school. If you want to know what a nation is trying to future-proof and what they beefing about, look at what's going on in the school. What are the arguments about curricula, about who has access to school, and what the aims of school should be? So the classroom is a reflection of a democracy. It is a reflection of a society. So we can look at it, yes, as an institution where we get our reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it's also a cultural institution that's a reflection of our values. Okay? So that is why I set up the title not as the history of Black education, not as African American education and teachers. No, it was the battle for the Black mind, because everybody had a vested interest in what would happen to the 4 million newly freed African Americans after emancipation. Would they have access to the one lever that gives us an opportunity to transcend our current condition? School has always been that elevator that can change your social or economic status like that, right? Would these new citizens have access to that? And what was that battle? What was that journey? And who had a vested interest in shaping that?
That's really good. The elevator. I'm using that, so I'm going to be using it when I talk about our schools going forward. You also write that for Black Americans, education has always been a political act. What does that mean in practice, and how has it shaped both the promise and the peril of Black education?
Well, it's important to remind ourselves that for Black Americans during slavery, it was illegal for Black people to learn to read and write. Forget even going to school. You could not possess that knowledge. That was, and doing so, what put you at risk for fines or death. Or death. Why? Because knowledge is power. And our oppressors knew that. So that's why Black Americans were not, that was something that was protected at all costs to exclude Black folks from. But Black Americans knew that all too well as well, which is why, by hook or by crook, Black folks have always valued education, have always found a way to, like they like to say in the South, wrench it. You're going to wrench it any kind of way. And that was even during slavery. We have examples of, they would call it cipher, where Black folks would learn how to spell a word or how to, decode something on a map and just learn how to cipher. So acquiring knowledge in any way was always valuable, an asset, and political. And we saw after emancipation, African Americans immediately put that into action as a part of their long freedom struggle.
You said something, even with the cipher. Is that CYP? Like a cipher, like rap cipher?
Right, yeah.
Okay, I love that. I read that in the book about how they would come together and they would do that. They would hear something that they would hear something on the plantation and come back and together try to decode it, which also harkens to the communal nature of education. We've always been in community, trying to learn together and lift one another up in that learning. And you talk about that later in the book, and we're going to get there. But you mentioned that, and that made me think about that. As with education as the elevator to liberation, where do you see that elevator lifting us now? And where do you see it stalled?
The battle for the Black mind is for anybody who has a vested interest in the future of our education. If we understand the history of the American education system and what was at stake with what it took to actually get to a point where in these United States, the idea of public education, meaning that any kid in America, citizen or not, has the right to access a school, right? That idea of, public education as a universal right in this country is a newer phenomena that came as an artifact, as a result in the aftermath of the Civil War. Let me give you just a little bit of context. After the Civil War, right, Emancipation Proclamation, the South is in shambles, right? It is an opportunity for the country to reimagine itself as a unified democracy. And in the South, there were no public schools for Black or white children. None. Public schools were private and reserved for the wealthy, the planter class, the folks who could afford it. So it was this moment of really envisioning an institution building and grand investment from Black communities. African Americans were racing to build schools in churches, in rural communities, outside, under trees, wherever they could. Northern philanthropists poured millions of dollars into the South to help support building out a school system. The federal government, through the Freedmen's Bureau, also made a tremendous investment in building out schools for African Americans in the South. And from that, you get this idea of boards of education, where the white South then said, why all these Negroes getting all these schools? We want schools for our kids too. So the idea of public education came in that Civil War era, right? In that post-Civil War era. Why do I bring up that historical context to answer your question about now? if we understood that how people fought and some died so that we could have access to this, so that education could be this value that we all can aspire, that we can access, we can aspire to, anybody, irrespective of race, ethnicity, sexuality, creed, class, region, you know that if you want to change your circumstance, what is the best bet to do that? Education. And we have the opportunity to tap into that in this country. That didn't come from, we can't take for granted that that just fell in our laps. Folks fought for that. Therefore, when you ask about today, while our Department of Education is being actively dismantled, defunded, when the college and university system across the board is under attack, and when I say under attack, I mean federal funding for science research, cancer research, for Alzheimer's research, for social scientific research is being cut across the board at the rate of 2/3 of that budget has been cut already. We have to get busy and understand that democracy is something that we do every day. Democracy is a verb. It is something that we must protect. And our schools are the main proxy for our democracy. Yeah, so when you ask, where are we now? America, you in danger, girl.
Yeah. Wow. So that's where we see it potentially stalling and where we have to act, right? Mm-hmm. You just touched on it, and I may skip this, but I didn't realize how much I knew about the Freedmen's Bureau because I work at Philander Smith University, and they definitely helped to found it as Walden Seminary in 1877. But I was also introduced to the AMA and pioneers. We're going to talk about a few of them. What do you want readers to understand about that foundation of Black education? What did you want them to take away from that period where the Freedmen's Bureau was in action? It was 6 years, right? 6 short years.
Yeah, well, the Freedmen's Bureau was open from 1865 to 1872. Okay, well, and that was part of it with the Freedmen's Bank. And then you have the fall of Reconstruction in 1877, a few years later. So it was a slow crumble. The Freedmen's Bureau is so important to, again, reorient ourselves around what our agencies and social safety nets in this country are supposed to do. So the Freedmen's Bureau is established by an act of Congress right after the Civil War, okay, 1865. And the charge of the Freedmen's Bureau is to support African Americans in the South in their transition to citizenship. They do this in a myriad of ways. The Freedmen's Bureau helps African Americans reunite with their families because many families have been separated during slavery. The Freedmen's Bureau also helps African Americans negotiate labor contracts with their employers, because that was not a social dynamic, right? So they stepped in and helped facilitate some of that. The Freedmen's Bureau also established the Freedmen's Bank. Now, this is super important because now, as African Americans move into becoming wage laborers, this bank is now an opportunity for Black folks to save money, put it in an institution, earn interest, take out loans so that they can do what?
Buy homes.
Buy homes, buy land, build wealth. What did Black folks do during that short period of Reconstruction with that support? Bought 15 million acres of land across the South in 12 years. Political office, African Americans held political office at the state, local, and at the congressional level, 2,000 African Americans in elected office during Reconstruction. So this is just giving us an idea of what a social safety net agency is supposed to do. But more important than anything, the Freedmen's Bureau invests heavily in building what were called freedmen schools, segregated black schools throughout the South. And they might be located in a little church, in a house, what have you. But they made a $5 million investment, which was worth about $130 million in today's time, and built 5,000 schools across the South. And in a short period of time, in a 30-year span, the literacy rate for African Americans went from 90% illiterate after the Civil War to 47% illiterate by the turn of the century. Okay? So these investments at the federal level, just to say, what does it mean to have a standard of what it means to have rights as a citizen, right, for our most vulnerable populations. So when I talk about the Freedmen's Bureau, and when you think about it, I want you to think about it as one of America's very first social safety net agencies. So before there was the GI Bill, before there was Medicaid and Medicare, okay, before there was, the Veterans Bureau, all agencies that are set up to support our country's most vulnerable populations, there was the Freedmen's Bureau. And with the flick of a wrist, Congress said,
We're tired.
we're too tired of this. Can't we stop talking about this race thing? And they shut it down.
Yeah.
They shut it down. So that institution, that story about the Freedmen's Bureau is very, very key to understand. It helps us understand why and how African American educators, school founders, parents, and students accomplished the wholly impossible by building and founding their own private schools when the government would not fund them anymore. And that's the part I love the most about the book.
Is it? I
Yeah.
saw you get excited. Did
Yeah.
y'all see her? She lifted up and she threw off a shawl. She did. She got really excited, but I did too. So I hope that you all, if you haven't read the book, you really lean into learning more about the Freedmen's Bureau and the ginormous, sizable impact that they had upon our people or black people during that time. We talked a little bit about, I'm looking at my time, this is so good, so much to unpack. We talked in the green room about HBCUs, and I definitely want to touch on that they are still, if you don't know, still the largest producers of black lawyers, doctors, engineers, teachers. What do people most often miss or misunderstand about their ongoing role in shaping America's future?
HBCUs are our heirlooms. They are so important to the not only just the history of American education, but they are an engine, as you mentioned, to creating a black middle class, right? And you mentioned the engine for producing black doctors, lawyers, engineers. The very first black PhD in Afrophysics has a HBCU undergrad degree. So that legacy is important, but there's a more capacious way that we can think about the role of HBCUs then and now. They are also cultural institutions and one of our country's very, very important memory institutions. Why? Because when no gallery would show black artists' work, who was holding exhibitions?
We were.
When no museum wanted to hold and archive African American collections so that we would have records of our history, who stewarded those collections?
We did.
When there were no social clubs for African Americans, when they were excluded from social clubs in their communities, where were those institutions bubbling up and being founded?
Yeah.
On the campuses of HBCUs. Yeah. And also, when you think about the history of any of our freedom movements, from the Civil Rights Movement to the Black Power movement to SNCC, where did those organizing strategies and tactics start to bubble up and get organized. Who was doing that? Young folks, mainly on college campuses, mainly at HBCUs. This is where a young John Lewis and a young Diane Nash start to organize those sit-ins at lunch counters and what have you, and form organizations like SNCC. This is where Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated is founded, and many of our Divine Nine fraternities and sororities. I do have to point out, though, that the first fraternity was not formed at a HBCU.
Well.
However, HBCUs are, again, the fertile ground where much of our organizations and movements were fomented, were founded. So it's important to just have a capacious view of the role that they continue to play, both in their educational value, but also in culture.
Agreed. And we have 4 in this state. If you don't know them, please get to know them. They are important. They are not afterthoughts. They are actually forethoughts about who we can become, who Black people can become in this country. All right, so our ladies.
Yes, our ladies.
Our sheroes, heroes. I learned so much. I am so appreciative of Lucy Craft Laney, Charlotte Hawkins Brown. Many of you have heard of Mary McLeod Bethune. Talk to me about digging deep into their stories, their whys, their motivation, because they're everything.
Yes.
We talk about their Black girl magic before that term was ever coined. Talk to me about them.
They are my favorite. I'm just in love with them, y'all. So one thing that was really important in writing The Battle for the Black Mind, although I am an academic, I'm a sociologist by training, I didn't want to write an academic book. I wrote this book for regular, degular, schmegular people. And the best way to convey the research is through stories. It's through the lives of what people did. And through this book, I profile 3 African-American educators, school founders, who are all Black women who founded schools in the Jim Crow South that lasted at least for half a century. Can I tell you about at least one of them?
Tell which one?
Oh, okay. Which one? Who you want to go with?
Lucy.
Okay, Miss Lucy is my favorite.
Miss Lucy has my heart.
So Lucy Craft Laney, she's born in 1854. So she's born during slavery, but what is unique about her is her parents had managed to buy their freedom. So Lucy was born free, and therefore she had more access, right? She learned to read and write as a little girl. She was able to attend some of the very first freedmen's schools that opened up after the Civil War, and she hit the ground running. So Lucy not only went to elementary school and high school, she was a part of the first graduating class of Atlanta University, which is now Clark Atlanta University.
Isn't that amazing, though?
Yes, she's amazing. And then, but she was just getting started there, y'all. She becomes a teacher, and she teaches for a decade through the Georgia public school system. She teaches a little bit in Savannah. She goes to Millersville. She knows what's up with the public education system. And she decides after 10 years that Black minds were not yet safe in the hands of the state. Jim Crow had rolled out. She saw just like that, Black kids were being left out of the system, left out of the opportunities that they should get. So what did Miss Lucy do? She moved to Augusta and founded her own private school. She said that she would not take $1 from the state because she didn't want the local board of education telling her what to do.
Unbossed is what she
Unbossed and unbothered. Okay, Miss Lucy raises hundreds of thousands of dollars from northern donors to fund her school, okay? Her school starts in a little church basement in Augusta. First year, 5 students. By year 2, 234 students.
Hold it. Did you hear that? 5 to 240 in the next year?
In the next year. That school grows so big, Haynes Institute takes up 2 city blocks in downtown Augusta. She's got a whole campus, a teaching staff. The school grows from a little elementary school to kindergarten, the first black kindergarten in Georgia, kindergarten through high school. She's got a drama club, a football team, a debate team, a traveling choir, okay? And then African Americans also could not access the healthcare system in the city of Augusta, meaning that if you need to go to the hospital, the white hospital, you could be denied care based on your race. So Ms. Lucy also founded the first black nursing school on her campus so that her community could have access to care. This was just one example of how black women school founders had vision and accomplished the wholly impossible with not a lot of resources, with not a lot of access. They did this under Jim Crow. So what could we be doing? I don't want to hear no excuse, you know? And that's the energy that these women gave me. Yeah. Yeah.
They do. They are resilient. They are creative. They are entrepreneurs. Education entrepreneurs.
They are. Yes.
So when you read this book, you will be wholly inspired by the women warriors who are and were the backbone of black education at that time in our country. So we won't spill it all. Get the book if you haven't read it. If you have read it, you know what I'm talking about, right? So good.
Ooh, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
So one of our other educational entrepreneurs that we feature in the book, Charlotte Hawkins Brown, I call her bad and bougie.
She is bad and bougie.
Look, and I think she would hate that publicly, but love it secretly. So Charlotte Hawkins Brown she founded a finishing school. Her school was a boarding school in North Carolina, right outside of Greensboro, that was set up with the aim to train America's black elite for society. So, you know, they're getting their school lessons, but they're also learning how to be the upper echelon. I had the great honor of serving as a conversationalist just last week with a brilliant author, A'Lelia Bundles.
Oh, yes.
A'Lelia Bundles is Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter, and she has a book out, Joy Goddess, right, about her, Madam C.J. Walker's daughter. Well, surprise, surprise, we're doing the conversation. I'm sitting in your seat just last week, talking to her, asking those questions. And she says out of nowhere, you know, my grandmother went to Charlotte Hawkins Brown School.
Oh my gosh.
Madam C.J. Walker sent her grandchildren there. She also was a major philanthropist, helping to fund a lot of these schools, including Lucy Craft Laney's Haynes Institute and Palmer Institute, that was Charlotte Hawkins Brown School. So just learning the full circle and being able to tell the story about the heterogeneity of blackness. We are not a monolith. We had all and it was reflected through the different kind of schools. Miss Lucy's school was up to something very different than what Miss Bad and Bougie was up to.
Right.
And yet and still, it's all okay. We need all of it.
Right.
So it was just a beautiful full circle moment.
That's so, did you have chills?
Oh, I did. Oh, my goodness.
In the retelling of it, your retelling of it. Okay, so we talk about not a monolith. We've got to hit this. When I say Jay-Z versus Nas, when I say Tupac versus Biggie, when I say Kendrick versus Drake, what comes to your mind? Talk to me about what comes to your mind, Dr. Brown.
So I say in the book, before there was a Kendrick and Drake, there was Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. That was the original diss tape, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and just think about what the genre of the diss tape is. It is when you have two titans. You got to be icons to have a real good battle, right? When two titans beef it out on the streets for everybody to see. They put all their business out on the street.
Right.
That's what Booker T. Washington and Du Bois were doing during the height of their debate. And I contextualize it in that way because the diss tape also does something else. It opens the space for public discourse, for now everybody to start weighing in on the issues, because it's really not just about the art form, it's the underlying, it's a political genre. For example, Kendrick and Drake, They Not Like Us is a political critique. Mm-hmm. To what extent are you going to commodify and capitalize, and what he would say, colonize a culture and put it up for sale? Will black capitalism be enough to save you? That's what was at stake with that debate. So too was the debate between Washington and Du Bois. So I took the painstaking time to dedicate a whole chapter to laying out for y'all what that debate was really about. I'm not going to tell you everything, but just know it came down to black education. It came down to this beef over black curricula. And for that, they were willing to fight it out. I'll say something else about Washington and Du Bois, because the fight did get ugly. In Souls of Black Folk, if y'all remember, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a whole chapter titled Of Booker T. Washington and Others.
He added him.
With his whole chest. Yes, he did. So it was, the beef was very public and it was rough. And yet, the archive shows that for the rest of Booker T. Washington's life, do you know that he and Du Bois continued to write each other?
Really?
Yes, they did.
So after the height of the beef, they were writing each other?
Throughout the beef.
Throughout the beef.
So what I learned throughout, after, and what I learned from that is something that I choose to model in the way that I show up as a public intellectual, as a black academic who is very, very rooted in liberation and freedom for everybody. The world that I envision includes all of us, right? And yet, what I learned from Washington and Du Bois was about how to be rooted in love. Because what I learned was both of those men imagined, I think, the same end game. They were beefing over
how to get there.
But they loved black people enough to continue to get up every day, and they sat on panels together. They wrote letters. They were saying all kind of "yo mama." They doing all this, in public in their beefs. But yet and still, they kept getting up and fighting the good fight. And in today's age, where it's so easy to cancel, delete, swipe left, block, if you hear something that you don't like coming from somebody who has a different perspective, that was instructive for me, and I think that it can offer something to my readers about what does it mean to be in struggle with one another, because it's not going to be easy.
Right. At all.
Right.
That is so good. It's so rich. But I believe that you've written about W.E.B. Du Bois.
A lot.
So I feel like I understood which side you were coming down. If you were gonna pick a side.
Mm-hmm. I do have a side. So you will read that in the book.
Yes. Yes. So talk to us a few minutes before we get to Q&A. How did this book change you? Did it change you? How did writing and researching, and I understood that it took you maybe 7 years to research this book.
Yeah.
How did this book impact Karida? Not Dr. Brown.
Oh.
Karida.
Wow, I haven't got that question before. This book changed me in so many ways. primarily, it shut up in my bones unshakable sense of courage, radical political imagination. It made clear to me that freedom dreaming is the necessary ingredient for the change that we want to see. If I were to take one consistent lesson that I saw over and over and over again through the actions of the many people that I profiled through the book, is that, Mary McLeod Bethune starts her school in Daytona, Florida, the Daytona Institute for Negro Girls. She founds that school with $1.50 in her pocket. She went and knocked on the doors of the local community members and said, hey, y'all, there's no school in this community for Black kids. I want to build one. And the community members said, okay, well, I know how to farm. I can sew. I know how to do a little carpentry. And she, along with her community, built that institution. That school still stands today as Bethune-Cookman College. She started this in 1904. Did I say the $1.50 part?
$1.50.
And what I learned from that is Mary, who was, 21 at the time? Mm-hmm. She didn't wake up and say, I am going to found an HBCU that's going to be around 450 years. She said, I'm going to take what I have, my $1.50, and make my community a little bit better than what it was yesterday. And I'm going to get up every day with that energy and give all I have to making that change. There is a saying called, small axe fall big tree. Mm-hmm. Those women put that into action, but it didn't start with the thing itself. It started with a vision. It started with a freedom dream. It started with imagination, imagining a world that does not yet exist, where there's no indication that it's possible, but you get up and do it anyway. And that's what this book, writing it, gave me. Thank you.
Good. That's good. Can y'all clap it up for that? Because I feel you. This book, for me, and I know we're going to get to our Q&A, but for me, it made me feel beautiful. Not in an aesthetic way, but beautiful and bold. It reminded me that I have boldness in my DNA. That's what it made me feel like I'm somebody. It made me feel like my people were education entrepreneurs and didn't even know it. They were doing what I do, asking for money, raising money. Do y'all know how hard it is to raise money today? They were raising money for their freedom dreams. And no excuses, seriously. That's what it did for me. I was like, girl, you got this. You can do this. You can do this. So that's what it did for me. And I thank you for your bravery, your expedition, and taking us along on an expedition and a journey into the battle for the Black mind, and showing us in the conclusion and the epilogue where we can fit in.
Yes, I did end this book with 10 things that we all can be doing in our everyday lives right now to be a part of that change that we want to see, or be a part of that doing the democracy that I talk about. Too often with writing books that are talking about systemic problems, right? You can get so lost in the problem part of the book. Right. You finish it and say, what can I do? And so I wanted to make sure to leave my readers with action steps, big and small, that we all can be doing to reactivate our muscle memory. We have this in our history. We've been through this before. It's different now because it's coming for all of us. Okay, it's coming for we the people. But there is this is not just a history. It is a playbook. The recipes are in that book. and it's a call to action.
It's in this book. Y'all have to get this book if you don't have it. And if you have it, pull it out, keep it out. Don't just put it on the shelf. Get it out, dust it off, go back through the playbook and find your 10 things, find your one thing a month or whatever it is. Find your thing and make sure you work it for the Battle of Black Mind. Real quick, we got like a couple seconds. Tell me about this cover.
Ooh.
Why this cover?
Okay.
Why this beautiful cover? I know the answer, but I want you to share with the people why.
Can somebody in the audience tell me who that little boy is? That is George Stinney Jr. He is the youngest American citizen to be executed by the state. At 14 years old in 1944 in South Carolina, he was accused of raping 2 white girls, a crime he did not commit. He was quickly tried by his community and sentenced to death. And George Stinney Jr. was electrocuted. His little body was too little to even fit in the electric chair, so they had to stack up books and sit him on that thing to cook him in front of his parents. Why is George Stinney on this cover? He's on this cover because it's symbolic about what it means when our systems fail our children in this country. But he's also on there because George was also a boy. George was also loved. George, too, had dreams. And when I look at that beautiful depiction of him, painted by my husband, Charlie Palmer, I can always remember George. We can always remember George for his beauty and humanity that the system denied him.
Beautiful. Thank you. The People's Professor. Now, you have an opportunity to ask, we have like a couple minutes for you to ask Dr. Brown a few questions. There are mics set up down here. Don't everybody come rushing forward at once, but I will say this. If it takes you longer than 30 seconds to ask a question, you're not asking a question. Okay? You're writing a chapter in the book, and she's already done that so well. So, with that said, the floor is now yours.
Yes. Author Brandon D. Campbell, I have a question for you. When we're looking at W.B. Du Bois as well as Booker T. Washington in the debate, in the context of where we are today from a labor perspective, workforce, but also education, who do you believe actually won that debate today, and who was right in the context of today?
How do you define one?
How do I define one?
Yes.
The state of where we are today in our education system in Black America.
Okay. I will take a stab at this question. I'm riding with W.E.B. Du Bois every day, all day, and I'll tell you why. And this becomes a very touchy subject because I touched this in my book as a author, a Black academic who is not an HBC alum, who has a very stringent critique of Booker T. Washington, and I understand that people love their school, Tuskegee Institute, which I talk about in this book, and they love Booker T. Washington and what he symbolizes and did. So I am acknowledging that because I have deep respect for that. However, what I'm talking about in this book are two warring ideologies about the educational philosophy that's going to get Black folks free. I'm not talking about these men and, men gonna be men, right? What I'm talking about is how thoughts become things, how our ideologies really set a trajectory for us, And what was Booker T. Washington publicly advocating for? Because I understand he was doing a lot behind the scenes, but his public message was this. He was promoting the industrial model of education. What was that? That was not the same thing as vocational school that we would think about today, like a trade school. The industrial model of education was a specific curriculum designed only for African Americans that intended to cultivate them for jobs in agriculture, domestic service, and teachers who could teach Black folks agriculture and domestic service. It also promoted, and he also promoted in his hundreds of speeches in places like Madison Square Garden, that African Americans need to stay in the South, keep their head down, till the land, earn the respect of white folks, and eventually they would get their rights and freedom. They do not need to be advocating for their rights. They don't need to be voting. They don't need to be trying to move north and escape the racial violence that they're going through. And this message was dangerous and harmful at the macro level because it gave license in the public imagination, in public discourse, for folks to think that that was okay. So I know what he was doing behind the scenes. I'm versed in his archive, but that public message shaped a discourse that for decades, Black folks had to undo and wrench back through, largely through the civil rights movement. What was Du Bois advocating? He and others like Ida B. Wells, like Carter G. Woodson, advocated for what was called the liberal model of education. This was, you can think of it similar to our liberal arts curricula today, but it wasn't about being elitist. It wasn't about, oh, everybody got to be a doctor, everybody got to get a PhD. No, it was about what are the underlying aims of education. Du Bois says this, is the aim of education to make men carpenters or to make carpenters men? And the question there was, is school about is it a transactional interaction to just make you a doer? Or is it to build character? Is it to make you a somebody? Is it to make you a citizen? So these questions are what I'm most interested in and what were at the roots of the ideologies that they promoted on the front lines, and then what impact did that have? How did that shape the philanthropic landscape for Black teachers and school founders? How did that shape the curricular landscape? What opportunities did it open or foreclose? So I'm talking not about intention, but impact. That's where I stand on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brandon. Is there another question? We have gentlemen.
First of all, I love how you unashamedly and boldly speak truth to power. You talked about the period between 1865 to
Yes.
1877 and the climate and environment that set up shutting down the opportunities that came through the freedoms period. What do you see that happened then and what's happening right now? Similar, that set the climate, and what are those things that we see going on that have that same kind of mindset?
It's so similar. I understand why folks like Reverend Barber continues to urge us to, if you want to understand the battle that we're in America right now, study the Reconstruction era. We are in a second Reconstruction. So what do I see as similar? So much, but what I will spend my time commenting on is the playbook, because I think that's what's important and instructive in this point, because if we get put on game, then you know how to move. What's that playbook from the fall of Reconstruction? So when Reconstruction falls, right in that lead up, how did Reconstruction even fall? You had Southern white statespeople bureaucrats and the elite class beating down the federal government's back to say, we want states' rights. States' rights. We want to go back to states' rights. We want choice. Sound familiar? So whenever you hear the phrase states' rights, I want you to always ask yourself, states' rights to do what and to whom? Because when they finally got those states' rights, when the Reconstruction era fell, immediately, every state in the South put Jim Crow laws on the books, separate and unequal. And those laws lasted for over a century. Well, okay, what's the playbook once you get a regime like that in power? It's just 3 steps, and they are so raggedy that they're using the same playbook today. They can't even come up with something new. So let me tell you how it goes. Step number 1 is to systematically defund. You have to defund your institutional infrastructure. You don't shut it down, and just look at the Department of Education as one of many examples today. They didn't shut down the Department of Education. They just defunded it down to the bare bones where it can barely function, where the institutional infrastructure is so precarious that it can't really deliver on any of its promises. What does that do? It gets you to step 2. That's manufacturing chaos. It didn't happen. It's manufactured. It's intentional. What does that manufactured chaos do to us everyday citizens? It makes you feel so overwhelmed because every day in the news is something else. It creates despair. It also is disempowering because it makes you feel like these problems are so big. What can I do? What can I do? And when you wear people down with that manufactured chaos, that's the perfect time for step number 3. And here, whoop, there it is. Let me show you what that is. That's when the billionaires swoop in and say, I have an answer for you. Let me privatize that. I'll fix that. And let me ask you this. When it comes to privatizing public goods, because this rhetorical strategy is very seductive. When you start talking about choice, school choice, who doesn't want choice? When you start talking about rights, of course I want rights. When you're talking about mass privatization of public goods, you are going to create a system of haves and have-nots. Now, for those of you who are of a certain age, when you was growing up, could you drink water out the hose when you was a little kid?
Indeed.
And wasn't it so good? You would just drink water out the faucet, the hose. We buy water, y'all. You kind of would be afraid to even touch the hose at this point. Mass privatization, water is not free. And we're afraid of water that doesn't come from a bottle that we buy from a privatized institution. Now, I want you to scale something as small as that, but water is life. For our school system, once they get that, y'all, and read chapter 11 of Project 2025. That's the chapter on the strategy for the education system. It is clear. It says it in that text. The goal is to completely privatize the American public school system. There will be no neighborhood school by the end of this if they have their way. So what does that mean? That will create a system of haves and have-nots when it comes to our babies' ability to access an education, to go to school, to get a tuna sandwich at school. If you can't afford school lunch, the cruelty of saying, then you should have thought about that before you had kids. Why do I have to pay for your kid? That's the road where there's a slippery slope around that rights and choice language with no guardrails around it. Defund, manufacture chaos, move to mass privatization. Remember that, y'all.
Well, you've heard it here, and you've heard it from our Black academic, Dr. Karida Brown. She's amazing. Again, if you don't have the book, you have an opportunity to get it tonight. If you have it, she'll be, is she going to be signing books too? She'll be mine first.
I got you.
Make sure you read the playbook at the end of the book and pick your strategy of choice or two, assign them to your family members. All right, The Battle for the Black Mind, Dr. Karida Brown, right here, Six Bridges Book Festival 2025. We appreciate you for coming out. We appreciate you.
Thank
Let's
you,
celebrate her
Sericia.
again.
Thank you.
I'm already looking forward to the next book. You're a sociologist, but you're a storyteller at heart, and we appreciate
Oh,
that.
thank
so
you.
Keep going, sis. We need you. We need more of this. We need more of you. So
Thank you so
all
much.
for coming out tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Little Rock. My first time in Arkansas. Yes, I've
You gotta
enjoyed
come
it.
back.
Yes.
We up here looking like Janet Jackson, like we're gonna do Pleasant Prince.
I know, right?
I know, control video, but you're gonna come back.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes,
You gotta come
absolutely.
back.
Yes.
Thank y'all. Meet
Very
us
good.
out front. Yes. Get your book signed.
This way?